They terrorized the seas, captured unimaginable treasure, and vanished without a trace. From ruthless villains to daring legends, these are the 20 pirates whose stories shook the world. Stick around and don't forget to subscribe to Factopia for more jaw-dropping history you won't believe. Number 1. Blackbeard, Edward Teach. The man history remembers as Blackbeard began his life far from the pirate flag, possibly in the bustling English port of Bristol, sometime around 1680. His true name was likely Edward Teach, or Thatch, a literate man who knew his numbers and, critically, his knots. We first meet him not as a villain, but as a sanctioned agent of the Crown, a privateer, battling the French and Spanish in the chaotic waters of the Caribbean during a long European war. He was a natural at the trade, brave, skilled, and utterly unafraid of cannon smoke. But when the peace treaties were signed in 1713, the Crown suddenly cut thousands of sailors loose. Teach was left adrift, possessing a taste for warfare and a sudden lack of income. This is the moment the switch was flipped. He soon found a new calling in the Bahamian pirate den of New Providence, joining the crew of Captain Benjamin Hornigold around 1716. Teach quickly rose through the ranks, his quiet confidence and raw talent undeniable. He went from lieutenant to captain, but the true transformation came after he captured a massive French slave ship called La Concorde in late 1717. He renamed her the Queen Anne's Revenge, mounted 40 guns, and created a floating fortress. And now Edward Teach began to craft his greatest weapon, Blackbeard. His appearance was a genius theatrical stroke. He stopped shaving and let his dense black beard grow into a wild, fearsome curtain. Before battle, he would plait it and, most famously, weave slow-burning fuses into his hair and underneath his hat. These fuses would smoke and glow, bathing his face in an eerie, hellish halo. Victims saw a demon emerge from the smoke, bristling with 3 pairs of loaded pistols strapped across his chest. He rarely had to fight. The terror of his silhouette alone was enough to make ships surrender instantly. Fear, he knew, was cheaper than gunpowder. His career exploded like a cannon shot. By the spring of 1718, he commanded a small armada. But Blackbeard craved a monumental act, a signature crime that would freeze the blood of every sailor in the colonies. He sailed north and, in a move of unbelievable arrogance, blockaded the entire port of Charleston, South Carolina. For over a week, he held the wealthiest city in the South hostage. He seized vessels, took prominent citizens prisoner, and then, with a straight face, demanded his ransom, a massive chest of medicines. He got exactly what he asked for, released his hostages, and sailed away, leaving the entire coast paralyzed by his name. Triumph complete, he sailed for the shallow waters of North Carolina. It was here, in the Beaufort Inlet, that his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, ran aground. Was it a clumsy error, or was it a calculated treachery? Many believe Blackbeard deliberately marooned his largest ship to ditch the bulk of his enormous crew, ensuring he kept the richest spoils for himself and a select few confidants. He then did the unthinkable. He accepted a royal pardon from the corrupt Governor Charles Eden and pretended to retire to a quiet civilian life in Bath, North Carolina. The terror of the sea was now a pardoned man, but only in name. He continued to plunder coastal vessels under the corrupt governor's protection. This blatant mockery of the king's law drove the neighboring governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, into a quiet rage. Without seeking permission, Spotswood funded a secret military expedition led by a young Royal Navy officer, Lieutenant Robert Maynard. The mission: find Blackbeard, dead or alive. In the pale dawn mist of November 22, 1718, Maynard found him hidden in Ocracoke Inlet. As the smaller naval sloops approached, Blackbeard's cannons roared, raking one of the ships and crippling it. Maynard, seeing the pirate preparing to board, gave a chilling order. He commanded most of his men to hide below deck. When Blackbeard and his crew boarded the seemingly deserted vessel, they were met by a silent, empty deck, a momentary pause of confusion. Then Maynard's hidden crew burst forth, and the battle dissolved into a bloody melee. The two captains met on deck, the disciplined naval officer against the demonic pirate. Blackbeard fought like a cornered beast, taking a bullet and a sword cut from Maynard himself. The fight seemed endless, but finally, weakened by at least 5 pistol shots and over 20 severe cuts, Blackbeard fell, his reign ending in a pool of blood. Maynard severed the head and hung it from his ship's bowsprit, sailing back to Virginia to claim his reward and prove, once and for all, that the terrifying legend of Blackbeard was finally violently dead. Number 2. Anne Bonny. The legend of Anne Bonny begins not on the deck of a ship, but in the tangled drama of an Irish manor. Born Anne Cormac around the end of the 17th century, she was the illegitimate daughter of a wealthy married lawyer and his servant maid. This scandalous origin set the tone for a life lived entirely on the edge of propriety. When her father, William Cormac, tried to save his reputation by dressing young Anne in boys' clothes and passing her off as a relative, he was already laying the groundwork for a woman who would learn to thrive in disguise. When the deceit was discovered, Cormac moved his family, the maid and his daughter, across the ocean to the American colonies, settling in the Carolinas. But a change of scenery did nothing to tame Anne's fiery temper. Stories say that even as a young woman, she was notorious for her violence, once brutally beating a boy who tried to assault her. She was a wild spirit destined for a wilder life, and when her wealthy father demanded she marry a man of his choosing, Anne rebelled. She married James Bonny, a penniless sailor, an act that caused her father to disinherit her on the spot. Disowned and scorned, Anne and James sailed to the notorious pirate haven of New Providence in the Bahamas. This was the headquarters of the Flying Gang, and it was here that Anne Bonny truly found her world. Ironically, her husband, James, quickly became a paid informant for the governor, turning in his fellow sailors to save his own skin. Anne, disgusted by his betrayal and already famous for socializing with the roughest men in town, soon fixed her gaze on a new man, the charismatic, flashy pirate captain, John Calico Jack Rackham. Anne didn't just fall in love. She ran toward the danger. When Rackham asked her to join his crew, she didn't hesitate, abandoning her husband and sailing out of the harbor with a band of pirates in 1720. But there was a problem. Women were considered catastrophically bad luck aboard a pirate ship. So Anne took an oath of secrecy and adopted her old disguise, bundling her bright red hair under a Man We-S hat and dressing in canvas trousers and a shirt. She sailed as a man, swearing, fighting, and drinking with the best of them. The deceit worked perfectly until a new recruit was brought aboard, a young sailor named Mark Reed. Anne, initially attracted to this handsome new shipmate, revealed her true gender to him. But Mark had a secret just as staggering. He was a woman, too. The recruit was actually Mary Reed, a veteran soldier who had lived her entire life disguised as a man. The two women, Anne Bonny and Mary Reed, formed an unbreakable, fearless bond, operating as the only female pirates during this peak of the Golden Age. While the rest of the crew was drunk or cowardly, it was these two who stood toe-to-toe with boarders, cutlass in hand. The partnership of Rackham, Bonny, and Reed was short-lived but intense. Their luck ran out just months later, in October 1720, when a king's ship caught them off the coast of Jamaica. When the attack came, the male crew, including Rackham, were often drunk and terrified, retreating below deck. Only Anne Bonny and Mary Reed stood on the main deck, fighting furiously, screaming curses and firing pistols at the boarding party. But their bravery wasn't enough. They were captured. Rackham and the rest of the men were swiftly tried and sentenced to hang. Anne was permitted a final visit with her lover, but rather than offer words of comfort, she delivered one of the most famous and coldest lines in pirate history, cutting him down to size. "I'm sorry to see you here, Jack, but if you had fought like a man, you need not be hanged like a dog." When it came time for her own trial, Anne Bonny, along with Mary Reed, revealed a final desperate card. They both pleaded their bellies, claiming the traditional stay of execution granted to pregnant women. They were found to be telling the truth. Mary Reed, however, fell ill in prison and died shortly after. But for Anne Bonny, the record simply stopped. She was spared the noose due to her pregnancy, but after that, she vanished. Did her wealthy father secretly buy her freedom? Did she return to Carolina to live under a false name, hiding her terrifying past until she died an old woman? Or did she find a way back to the sea? Her fate remains history's most tantalizing question, the ultimate cliffhanger for the world's most famous female pirate. Number 3. Calico Jack Rackham. The life of John Rackham, forever known as Calico Jack, was a curious mix of swagger, ambition, and baffling failure. He was an Englishman who earned his colorful nickname from his preference for flashy, brightly patterned Indian cotton clothing, a marked contrast to the usual grime of the high seas. While he was never the most successful or terrifying pirate of his time, his story is immortalized not by the gold he stole, but by the women he kept and the iconic flag he designed. Rackham first appears in the historical record as the quartermaster aboard the ship of the feared pirate Captain Charles Vane. The quartermaster was the man who kept the books, enforced the pirate code, and ensured the spoils were split fairly. It was a role that gave Rackham considerable power and respect among the crew. But in November 1718, Vane's luck ran out. After encountering a large, heavily armed French man-of-war, Vane, correctly judging the battle too risky, made the executive decision to retreat. The crew exploded in outrage. They were pirates, not cowards, and Rackham saw his opening. He led a near mutiny, accusing Vane of cowardice. The crew held a vote, and in a shocking turn of events, they deposed Vane, marooning him with a small party. John Rackham was instantly elected captain. He celebrated his new command by attacking and capturing the very French vessel Vane had feared, a swift, decisive act that cemented his new authority. He was now Captain Calico Jack, and he needed a symbol. He designed his own Jolly Roger, a black flag featuring a striking white skull above two crossed cutlasses. It was bold, clean, and became the enduring, global symbol of piracy. Rackham sailed for New Providence, the pirate republic, where he accepted a royal pardon, hoping to settle down with his new status. But his destiny was waiting in the taverns. It was here he encountered Bonny, the beautiful, tempestuous wife of a local pirate informant. Rackham became instantly smitten, and, disgusted by her own husband's role as a snitch, quickly fell for the flamboyant captain. Rackham offered to buy Anne from her husband, a surprisingly common practice, but when the husband refused, the lovers did the only thing true pirates could do. They stole a ship, the small sloop William, and fled Nassau in 1720, returning instantly to the criminal life. Their piracy was swift, opportunistic, and surprisingly petty, often targeting small fishing boats and lightly armed traders along the coast of Jamaica and Cuba. Their crew was small, but their legend was about to grow immense when they encountered another disguised woman, Mary Reed, and brought her aboard. Calico Jack now commanded a ship featuring two of the only known female pirates in history, both disguised as men, fighting with a ferocity that overshadowed his own. The end came as quickly as his rise. In October 1720, while Rackham's vessel was anchored near Jamaica, a British commissioned pirate hunter, Jonathan Barnett, caught them completely by surprise. In a pathetic final battle, the male pirates, including Calico Jack, were reportedly so drunk they barely resisted, hiding below deck. It was the two women, Bonny and Mary Red, who remained topside, fighting the boarding party until they were finally subdued. Rackham was swiftly tried and convicted of piracy in Jamaica. His fate was sealed. The morning before his hanging, Bonny was permitted a final visit. But Rackham found no comfort in her eyes, only contempt. Her legendary last words to him, "I'm sorry to see you here, but if you had fought like a man, you need not be hanged like a dog," were a damning judgment on his entire career. On November 18, 1720, John Rackham was executed. His body was displayed in a cage on a small islet at the entrance to Port Royal Harbor, a grim warning known ever since as Rackham's Cay. He may not have been the best pirate, but his iconic flag and scandalous associations ensured that Calico Jack would forever be recognized as the ultimate figurehead of pirate romance. Number 4. Captain Kidd. The tragedy of Captain William Kidd is that he was a man who tried desperately not to be a pirate, only to be branded as the most famous one of his age. His true story is a terrifying tale of political betrayal and the impossible razor-s edge between lawful authority and lawless greed. Kidd began his career not as a rogue, but as a respected figure. Born in Scotland around 1645, he rose through the ranks to become a successful sea captain, a privateer commissioned by the Crown to prey on French vessels during wartime. He settled in New York, married a wealthy widow, and became a prominent, propertied gentleman, a hero to the colonies. But by the 1690s, the Crown had a new, vital mission: clear the Indian Ocean of the brutal Red Sea men, pirates who were crippling the East India Company's trade. In 1695, Kidd was approached by a powerful group of Whig noblemen in London, led by the governor of New York, Lord Bellamont. They offered him an extraordinary commission: sail to the Indian Ocean, hunt the most notorious pirates, seize their plunder, and keep a hefty share of the profits. This was not a military expedition. It was a secret, high-stakes financial venture backed by some of the most powerful men in England. Kidd bought a magnificent new ship, the 34-gun, oar-powered adventure galley, and set sail in 1696 with a crew of 150 men. The gentleman captain had become a sanctioned pirate hunter. But the voyage immediately dissolved into a nightmare. Pirates proved elusive, and French prizes were scarce. Sickness ravaged the crew, killing dozens and leaving the survivors frustrated and volatile. For a year and a half, Kidd found almost nothing. His expensive venture was sinking into financial ruin, and the men who had signed on for quick riches began to murmur of mutiny. The pressure on Kidd was immense, forcing him to make choices that would seal his doom. In one desperate, fatal moment in 1697, the crew, frustrated by Kidd's refusal to attack a seemingly easy target, threatened to seize control. During the explosive argument that followed, Kidd lost his temper and struck his gunner, William Moore, with an iron bucket, crushing the man's skull and killing him instantly. Kidd was now a killer, his hands stained with the blood of his own man. The line was crossed. Desperation led to true crime. In 1698, Kidd and his crew finally found a prize: the massive Armenian-owned merchant ship, the Quedagh Merchant, laden with gold, silver, silk, spices, and treasure, rumored to be worth a king's ransom. Though the ship's captain was English, Kidd's men convinced him to justify the seizure by claiming it carried French papers. This was the moment William Kidd went from a privateer hunting pirates to a pirate stealing from merchants. Unbeknownst to Kidd, in the years he had been at sea, the political climate had changed drastically. The noblemen who backed him now found their high-profile pirate hunting project an embarrassment. When news of Kidd's actions and the immense treasure reached England, his powerful sponsors quickly abandoned him, rebranding him from an agent of the Crown to a notorious criminal. He was now the perfect scapegoat. In 1699, Captain Kidd, unaware of the political firestorm awaiting him, sailed back to the colonies. He tried to hide his prized ship and, famously, buried some of the captured treasure on Gardiner's Island off Long Island, issuing dark threats to the Gardiner family if they dared touch it. He then sailed to Boston to seek a pardon from Lord Bellamont, the very man who had commissioned him. But the promised pardon was a trap. Bellamont, needing to save his own skin, had Kidd arrested and stripped of his treasure. Kidd was shipped back to London in chains, where he stood trial for piracy and murder. It was a sham trial, a brutal political exercise where crucial evidence that might have exonerated him, like the captured French papers, was suppressed. Kidd went to the gallows protesting his innocence, a victim of the very men who had initially sent him out. On May 23, 1701, William Kidd was hanged. The first rope broke, plunging him to the ground in a horrifying spectacle. They hoisted him up a second time. To ensure his death served as a permanent warning to all who might defy the Crown. His corpse was encased in an iron cage, or gibbet, and left to rot for years over the River Thames at Tilbury Point. But this grisly end only fueled the enduring legend. Because of the recovered Gardiner's Island hoard and the vast, uncounted treasure from the Quedagh Merchant, the story of Captain Kidd became eternally linked to the mystery of buried pirate treasure, a myth far grander than the unfortunate man himself. Number 5. Henry Morgan. What if I told you that one man could strike fear into entire empires and then walk away a hero? That man was Henry Morgan, a name that still echoes through history, not just as a pirate, but as a legend who lived on the edge of law, loyalty, and sheer audacity. Born around 1635 in Wales, Morgan's early life is shrouded in mystery. Nobody knows exactly how a boy from a quiet town became one of the most feared figures in the Caribbean. By his teens, he was sailing across the Atlantic to a chaotic world of treasure, danger, and opportunity. the perfect playground for someone with a daring mind and ruthless ambition. Morgan first made his mark in the 1660s, when England and Spain were locked in a deadly game over the New World. Unlike ordinary pirates, Morgan wasn't reckless. He was a strategist. His first legendary raid was on Portobello, a Spanish port overflowing with gold. With just a few hundred men, he captured the town in a lightning strike, seizing treasure that would have made kings jealous. But Morgan wasn't done. That victory was only the beginning. In 1670, he turned his sights on Maracaibo, a fortified city in Venezuela. Most would have hesitated knowing the risks, but not Morgan. He stormed the city, capturing immense wealth and leaving a trail of destruction that terrified the Spanish. And then came the boldest move of his life, Panama City, 1671. A city thought untouchable, a treasure trove guarded by soldiers, walls, and fear. Morgan didn't just attack. He outsmarted them, outmaneuvered them, and conquered them. The city burned, the Spanish panicked, and Morgan returned to Jamaica with spoils that cemented his legendary status. But here's the twist. The same man who terrorized the Spanish would later be knighted and appointed lieutenant governor of Jamaica. How does a pirate go from feared outlaw to respected statesman? Morgan had a rare combination of audacity, intelligence, and charm. He navigated political waters as skillfully as he had navigated the Caribbean seas. Even so, his life wasn't without peril. Peace treaties and shifting alliances meant that yesterday's victories could become today's crimes. Morgan had made enemies on all sides, yet somehow he survived. His daring raids, sharp mind, and uncanny ability to seize opportunity kept him untouchable until his death in 1688. Henry Morgan's story is more than pirate legend. It's a tale of calculated risk, ambition, and the thin line between hero and villain. He captured cities, amassed unimaginable wealth, and became a symbol of the Golden Age of Piracy. Yet he also held power, respect, and even a knighthood. His life asks a question that still fascinates us today. Can one man truly change the fate of empires? And the answer, in Henry Morgan's case, is a resounding yes. Number 6. Francis Drake. What if one man could make an entire empire tremble, and yet be celebrated as a hero by his own country? That man was Francis Drake, the English sailor whose name struck fear into Spain and inspired awe in England. But his story is far from simple. It's a tale of treasure, danger, and audacity that changed the world. Born around 1540 in Devon, England, Drake came from humble beginnings. His father was a farmer, and the sea might have seemed like a far-off dream. But young Francis was restless, curious, and fearless. By his teens, he had already set sail, learning navigation, survival, and the deadly art of privateering, the Crown's legal license to raid Spanish ships and settlements. England and Spain were bitter enemies, and the oceans were a lawless stage where fortunes and lives could be won or lost in an instant. Drake first made a name for himself with daring raids along the Caribbean and South American coasts. To the Spanish, he was a terrifying figure, leaving destruction in his wake, earning the nickname El Draque, the Dragon. To the English, he was a patriot, returning home with gold, silver, and glory. Every raid built his reputation as one of the most cunning and ruthless sailors of his time. But Drake wasn't content with being a regional threat. In 1577, he embarked on the adventure that would define his life, a circumnavigation of the globe. Commanding the ship Golden Hind, he sailed across uncharted waters, raided Spanish colonies along the Pacific coast, and faced storms, disease, and hostile fleets. By the time he returned to England in 1580, he had achieved what no Englishman had done before. He had sailed completely around the world, bringing back treasure that stunned the nation and solidified his legendary status. Drake's life was a series of calculated risks. In 1587, he launched a preemptive strike on the Spanish fleet at Cadiz, delaying the Armada's attack on England. The following year, he played a key role in defeating the Spanish Armada, ensuring England's survival against overwhelming odds. Yet Spain never forgot him. Every victory came with the constant threat of revenge, capture, or death. But Drake thrived on danger. Even in his final years, Drake did not slow down. On his last expedition to the Caribbean in 1596, he fell ill with dysentery and died near Panama. Yet his legend had already been sealed. To England, he was a national hero. To Spain, he remained a pirate of unmatched cunning and cruelty. Francis Drake's life shows how one man can live between two worlds. Hero and villain, explorer and raider, celebrated and hunted. He circumnavigated the globe, challenged the mightiest empire of his time, and turned the dangers of the sea into a stage for his own legend. His story asks a question that still captivates us today. Can courage, cunning, and ambition truly rewrite the rules of history? And in the case of Francis Drake, the answer is a resounding yes. From a restless boy in Devon to the terror of the Spanish seas, his life became a saga of adventure, risk, and audacity that no treasure chest could ever contain. Number 7. Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart. Imagine a pirate so successful that he captured more ships than anyone else in history, over 400 in just a few short years. That man was Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, whose name alone made sailors tremble and treasure fleets rethink their routes. But his rise to infamy began in a way no one could have predicted. Roberts was born around 1682 in Wales, far from the lawless seas he would later dominate. Little is known about his early life, but like many young men of his era, he went to sea, seeking adventure and fortune. He started as a simple sailor on merchant ships, following the routine of long voyages, harsh discipline, and dangerous waters. But fate had other plans. In 1719, while aboard the ship Princess, Roberts's life changed forever. His ship was attacked by pirates led by Howell Davis. Instead of resisting, Roberts joined the pirates, an act that would launch him onto a path of unparalleled infamy. What set Roberts apart wasn't just bravery. It was intelligence, charisma, and a ruthlessness that commanded loyalty. Within months, he became the captain of his own ship, and from there, his legend exploded. Black Bart was not a reckless marauder. He was a master tactician. Over the next 4 years, he captured more than 400 ships, plundering the Caribbean, the West African coast, and even the South American coast. Each raid was meticulously planned. He knew how to strike fast, instill fear, and secure loyalty from his crew. Unlike other pirates who relied on sheer violence alone, Roberts combined discipline, cunning, and showmanship. His flags, adorned with skeletons and swords, were meant to terrify before a single cannon fired. But Roberts' life wasn't just about treasure. It was about rules and respect. He enforced a strict pirate code: fair shares of loot, clear punishments for disobedience, and care for the sick and injured. His crew admired him not just for his victories, but for his leadership. Black Bart wasn't merely feared, he was respected, a rare combination in the brutal world of piracy. Yet every pirate's life carries danger, and Roberts's luck would not last forever. In 1722, during an attack off the coast of Africa, he was ambushed by the Royal Navy. Roberts refused to surrender. He fought bravely, reportedly aiming to go down with his ship rather than face capture. A musket shot ended his life in battle at the age of 39 or 40, cutting short a career that had rewritten the history of piracy. Bartholomew Roberts' story is extraordinary not only for the sheer number of ships he captured, but for the way he transformed piracy into an organized, strategic, and almost legendary enterprise. He became a symbol of what a pirate could achieve: wealth, power, and influence, if you dared to challenge the rules of the world. His name, Black Bart, still sends a shiver through history, a reminder that one cunning, ambitious man could dominate the seas, leaving an unmatched legacy of fear, respect, and adventure. Number 8. Mary Red. What if one of the most feared pirates of the Golden Age was a woman? That woman was Mary Red, a fighter so fierce that sailors didn't suspect her true identity until it was too late. Her life was a story of survival, courage, and secrets that could have killed her. Mary Red was born around 1685 in England, into a world that offered little freedom for women. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father abandoned her. To survive, Mary's grandmother disguised her as a boy, calling her Mark so she could work and earn money. From that early moment, Mary learned the power of disguise, deception, and resilience, skills that would define her entire life. As a young adult, Mary continued living as a man, taking to the sea where opportunities were otherwise impossible for a woman. She served on merchant ships and as a soldier in the Netherlands, gaining experience with combat and navigation. But fate would push her into the lawless world of piracy, where her courage and cunning would make her legendary. Mary eventually joined Calico Jack Rackham's pirate crew in the Caribbean, still disguised as a man. On board, she revealed herself to be a woman, but by then, her reputation had already been built on skill, fearlessness, and an unmatched talent with weapons. She fought alongside another famous female pirate, Bonny, and together they became the terror of the seas. Sailors whispered tales of these women fighting like men, taking down enemies without hesitation, and surviving in a world dominated by violence and betrayal. Mary's life was a constant balance of danger and secrecy. She was fierce in battle, often participating directly in raids and fights, earning the respect of her crew. But her time on the seas was always under threat. The English Navy was hunting pirates relentlessly, and betrayal lurked around every corner. In 1720, Mary's luck ran out. She and Calico Jack's crew were captured by the British Navy. Tried for piracy in Jamaica, she faced execution, but her story took another dramatic turn. She was pregnant. The court postponed her hanging until after the birth, but the harsh conditions of prison took a toll. Mary Red died in her cell later that year, at about 35, ending a life that had defied every expectation placed on women of her era. Mary Red's story is remarkable not just because she was a pirate, but because she broke every barrier, gender, social status, and societal expectation, to live life on her own terms. She fought, survived, and ruled on the high seas, all while hiding her true identity. Her death was tragic, but her legend lives on, a tale of courage, rebellion, and the dangerous allure of freedom in a world that sought to confine her. Mary Red, a pirate, a warrior, a woman who dared to defy the rules, and whose story still haunts the history of the Caribbean. Number 9. Zheng Yi Sao. Few pirates in history commanded such fear and such respect as Zheng Yi Sao, the woman who ruled the largest pirate fleet the world has ever seen. Over 1,800 ships sailed under her command, with more than 70,000 men and women following her orders. Her power was unmatched, her discipline legendary, and her rise from obscurity to dominance remains one of the most remarkable stories in maritime history. Born around 1775 in China, Zheng Yi Sao lived an ordinary life until marriage changed everything. She wed Zheng Yi, a pirate captain operating in the South China Sea. When he died in 1807, she inherited his fleet, but she didn't just maintain it. She expanded it, organized it, and turned it into a force that terrified empires. Zheng Yi Sao's strength wasn't only in numbers, it was in strategy and leadership. She created strict codes. Theft among crew members was punishable by death, desertion was met with harsh consequences, and women on her ships were protected, an unusual rule among pirates. Her fleet struck fear along trade routes, levied tribute on coastal towns, and repeatedly outsmarted the navies of China, Portugal, and Britain. She divided her ships into squadrons, coordinated attacks with precision, and used intelligence networks to anticipate enemy movements. Any force that tried to challenge her quickly realized that defeating her fleet in open battle was impossible. Governments often had no choice but to negotiate, a testament to her authority and tactical genius. Despite her fearsome reputation, Zheng Yi Sao lived to retire peacefully, an almost unheard-of ending for a pirate of her stature. In 1810, she struck a deal with the Chinese government, surrendering her fleet but keeping her fortune. She retired quietly, running a gambling house and enjoying the wealth she had amassed, leaving a legacy of power, control, and cunning that few could rival. Zheng Yi Sao was more than a pirate. She was a master strategist, a leader who demanded loyalty, and a woman who rose to dominate a male-dominated world. Her story challenges the image of pirates as reckless criminals. She was disciplined, intelligent, and in full command of her destiny. She remains the pirate queen of history, ruling thousands, terrifying empires, and stepping away on her own terms. proof that true power can be wielded without dying in battle or on the gallows. Number 10. de Bonny. de Bonny wasn't born to terrorize the seas. He was born into comfort, wealth, and respect. Around 1688, in Barbados, he grew up as a wealthy landowner, inheriting a life that promised security and influence. He had a family, property, and social standing that most could only dream of. Yet somehow, the lure of adventure, and perhaps rebellion, pulled him away from everything he knew. By the early 1710s, de Bonny had done the unthinkable. He purchased a ship and became a pirate, earning the nickname Gentleman Pirate for his unusual background. Bonnet's entry into piracy was unprecedented. Unlike other pirates, hardened by life at sea, he had almost no nautical experience. He didn't grow up on ships, didn't know the harsh rules of pirate life, and had no instinct for leadership at sea. Yet he bought a 60-ton sloop called the Revenge, hired a crew, and attempted to take command of the lawless Caribbean waters. This decision baffled everyone, including colonial authorities, his own family, and even seasoned pirates who had never seen a wealthy gentleman willingly throw away his life of comfort. Early on, Bonnet's inexperience was evident. He struggled to maintain authority over his crew, often relying on his officers or alliances with other pirates to navigate battles and raids. One of the most notable partnerships came in 1717, when he joined forces with Edward Blackbeard Teach, one of the most feared pirates of the Golden Age. Together, they captured several ships along the Carolina coast, using terror and intimidation to dominate trade routes. But while Blackbeard thrived on fear and cunning, Bonnet's lack of strategy and seafaring skill often left him vulnerable. Despite his shortcomings, Bonnet's pirate career was audacious. He dared to challenge merchant vessels, negotiate ransoms, and even attempt his own raids independently. Yet, the life he chose was dangerous, unpredictable, and ultimately unsustainable. He was captured multiple times, narrowly escaped death, and faced betrayal from both allies and enemies. His wealth and social status could not protect him from the consequences of his decisions, nor could it shield him from the relentless pursuit of colonial authorities determined to end his career. By 1718, Bonny's luck ran out. Operating along the North Carolina coast, he was captured by the Royal Navy after a series of failed raids. Unlike many pirates who might have died in battle or escaped into legend, Bonnet faced the full consequences of his choices. He was tried and sentenced to death, and later that year, he was hanged. A dramatic and ironic end for a man who had started his journey as a wealthy gentleman. de Bonny's story is both fascinating and tragic. He was a man who defied societal expectations, abandoning comfort and safety for the perilous and chaotic life of a pirate. Unlike other infamous figures of the era, he lacked the natural cunning or brutality of a Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts, yet he dared to walk in their shadows. His story is a unique blend of ambition, curiosity, and human frailty, a cautionary tale of what happens when someone chases adventure without fully understanding the consequences. Number 11. Pierre Le Grand. Pierre Le Grand is a name that history almost forgot, yet his audacity made him one of the most daring pirates of the 17th century. Born in France in the early 1600s, very little is known about his early life. What we do know is that by the 1660s, he had become a pirate or privateer, prowling the Caribbean and Atlantic waters, seeking opportunity, adventure, and, above all, loot that would make him famous. Le Grand's most legendary exploit came in 1664, an act that would secure his place in pirate lore. At the time, Spanish treasure galleons plied the Caribbean, carrying gold, silver, and precious goods from the New World back to Spain. These ships were heavily armed, with dozens of sailors and soldiers aboard. Most pirates would have avoided such a target, knowing the odds were stacked against them. But Pierre Le Grand was no ordinary pirate. Armed with nothing more than a rowboat and 28 men, Le Grand pulled off a feat that few would dare even imagine. Under the cover of night, he and his small crew silently approached a massive Spanish galleon, while the Spanish officers slept in confidence aboard their treasure-laden ship. Le Grand and his men snuck aboard, silently killing the officers one by one. The element of surprise was total. Before the crew could react, the ship was in Le Grand's hands. The remaining Spanish sailors, terrified and outnumbered in the chaos, had no choice but to surrender. The audacity of the raid stunned everyone who heard of it. Here was a pirate who took on a ship far larger than his own, relying on cunning, stealth, and boldness rather than brute force. Legrand did not linger or negotiate. He seized the treasure and vanished, leaving no trace. The Spanish Empire was enraged, but their greatest treasure galleon had simply disappeared into history, its capture a humiliating defeat and a warning about the cunning of pirates like Pierre Legrand. What makes Legrand remarkable is not just the size of his prize, but the intelligence, timing, and courage required to pull off such a raid. Most pirates of the era relied on numbers, firepower, or intimidation to capture ships. Legrand relied on surprise, strategy, and nerves of steel, qualities that set him apart from his contemporaries. His single raid became a blueprint for daring piracy, proving that cleverness could overcome overwhelming odds. After the heist, Pierre Legrand vanished with the loot. No one knows exactly where he went, what became of his fortune, or how long he continued piracy afterward. Some accounts suggest he retired wealthy, living out his days in obscurity. Others claim he continued raiding, slipping in and out of history like a ghost. This mystery only amplified his legend, making him a symbol of the ultimate pirate fantasy. A daring strike, unimaginable treasure, and a disappearance that ensured the story would live forever. Pierre Legrand's story reminds us that piracy was not always about massive fleets or long campaigns. Sometimes a single, brilliantly executed raid could immortalize a pirate. He combined courage, intelligence, and audacity in a way that few others ever could, leaving a legacy that inspired awe and fear across the Caribbean. Number 12, Sam Bellamy. Sam Bellamy wasn't the stereotypical pirate. He wasn't a hardened criminal from birth or a violent marauder of the seas. Instead, he became known as the Robin Hood of the Caribbean, a pirate whose charm, ideals, and ambition captured the imagination of all who heard his story. Born around 1689 in England, Bellamy came from humble beginnings. He grew up in poverty, working as a sailor at a young age, but he dreamed of a life on his own terms, where adventure and justice went hand in hand. Bellamy's entry into piracy wasn't planned, but fate and opportunity led him to a life that would make him legendary. He initially sailed on merchant ships and privateering missions, gaining valuable experience navigating the Atlantic and Caribbean waters. Over time, he grew disillusioned with the rigid hierarchy and injustice of the merchant world. Pirates offered freedom, wealth, and a code of fairness that appealed to his sense of justice. Unlike most pirates, Bellamy's reputation was built not on brutality but on charisma and strategy, earning the loyalty of his crew and the admiration of those he spared. By the early 1710s, Bellamy commanded his own ship and began a series of raids along the American coast and the Caribbean. His targets were usually rich merchant ships, and he was known for treating his prisoners fairly, often distributing a portion of the plunder to the poor. His fair-mindedness and the way he shared wealth earned him the nickname Robin Hood of the Seas. But Bellamy was no soft-hearted dreamer. He was also a cunning strategist, using speed, surprise, and clever tactics to capture ships with minimal resistance, building a fleet and a reputation that rivaled the most feared pirates of the era. One of the most infamous moments of Bellamy's career was his capture of the Whydah galley, a heavily armed slave ship from Africa laden with treasure. Bellamy seized the vessel in 1717, turning it into his flagship. The Whydah became a symbol of his success and ambition, and under his command, it carried immense wealth and a crew devoted to him. Bellamy's romantic and daring persona, combined with the power of the Whydah, cemented his place in pirate history. Yet, like many pirate stories, Bellamy's life ended in tragedy. In April 1717, the Whydah sailed off the coast of Cape Cod during a violent storm. The ship was wrecked, and Bellamy, along with most of his crew, drowned. For centuries, the wreck lay hidden beneath the ocean, a reminder of the fleeting nature of pirate glory. It wasn't until 1984 that treasure hunter Barry Clifford discovered the Whydah wreck, bringing Bellamy's story and his legendary treasure back into the world's imagination. Sam Bellamy's life is remarkable not only for his daring raids, but for his unique combination of romance, justice, and leadership. He was a pirate who inspired loyalty without resorting to cruelty, who shared his wealth and treated his crew and captives fairly, and who navigated the chaotic seas of the Caribbean with both ambition and morality. His story remains one of the most romanticized and humanized tales of piracy, blending adventure with ideals that most pirates ignored. Number 13. Charles Vane. Charles Vane was the kind of pirate that authorities feared and sailors whispered about. Born around 1680 in England, he grew up in a time of conflict and opportunity on the high seas. Unlike other pirates who sought wealth quietly or tried to balance their criminal lives with survival, Vane thrived on chaos, rebellion, and sheer defiance. He became notorious for one simple fact: he never compromised, and he would rather burn his own ship than surrender to the law. Vane's entry into piracy came during the chaotic aftermath of the War of Spanish Succession, when many sailors turned to crime on the seas. Vane quickly earned a reputation for being ruthless, unpredictable, and fearless. Unlike some pirates who accepted pardons or tried to negotiate with authorities, Vane refused all offers of clemency, choosing to live entirely outside the law. This unwavering defiance made him a symbol of pirate rebellion and a nightmare for colonial governors and merchant captains alike. One of the defining moments of Vane's career came in 1718, when he was offered a pardon by the governor of the Bahamas. Most pirates would have jumped at the chance for safety, but Vane laughed at the offer. To him, surrender was weakness. His reputation only grew after he burned his own ship rather than allow it to be captured, a dramatic statement that emphasized his commitment to freedom over life itself. Vane's boldness inspired loyalty among his crew and fear among his enemies. He became a pirate's pirate, cunning, aggressive, and utterly uncompromising. Vane operated primarily in the Caribbean, raiding merchant vessels along the Bahamas, Jamaica, and the American colonies. He was known for lightning raids and brutal tactics, leaving a trail of destruction while eluding capture. Yet he wasn't reckless. Vane had a sharp mind for strategy and navigation, often using storms, shallow waters, and hidden coves to his advantage. His crews admired him not just for his courage, but for his unwavering commitment to pirate ideals: freedom, loyalty, and survival on his own terms. But Vane's refusal to compromise eventually caught up with him. In late 1718, after a series of setbacks and betrayals by former allies, he was finally captured by the Royal Navy. Even in the face of death, Vane did not plead or bargain. He was tried and hanged in Port Royal, Jamaica, marking the end of one of the most fearless and rebellious pirate careers of the Golden Age. Charles Vane's story stands out not for wealth or treasure, but for principle and defiance. He was a pirate who rejected compromise, who burned his own ship rather than surrender, and who lived by his own code. Unlike many pirates who sought glory or riches, Vane sought freedom and autonomy, and he was willing to pay the ultimate price for it. Vane's legacy is that of a hardcore rebel, a pirate whose life embodied the raw, dangerous, and unpredictable spirit of the Caribbean seas. Number 14. Henry Every. Henry Every's name became a nightmare for kings, merchants, and emperors across the globe. Born around 1659 in England, Every started as a sailor in the Royal Navy, but quickly grew restless with the rigid discipline and low pay. He longed for freedom, wealth, and adventure, and the high seas offered all three. Yet few could have predicted that this young sailor would become the most wanted pirate of his era, sparking the first global manhunt in history. Every's rise to infamy began in the late 1690s. He joined a privateering expedition, only to mutiny with his fellow sailors, taking control of the ship Charles II, which they renamed Fancy. From that moment, Every was no longer just a sailor. He was a pirate captain, commanding a crew united by ambition, daring, and the promise of unimaginable wealth. The pinnacle of Every's career, and the act that would cement his place in history, was his raid on the Mughal treasure fleet in 1695. The fleet, returning from India laden with gold, silver, and jewels, was no easy target. Every and his crew attacked near the coast of Surat, India, in a daring battle that few believed they could win. But Every's tactics were brilliant. They overwhelmed the heavily armed Mughal ships and seized a fortune in loot that stunned the world. It was a treasure so immense that it destabilized trade, enraged the Mughal Empire and sparked a massive international hunt for Evri and his crew. Governments across Europe and Asia mobilized to capture him. The King of England, the East India Company, and the Mughal Emperor all wanted him dead, or at least in chains. Rewards were offered in multiple currencies, letters of marque were issued, and every port became a potential trap. Yet Henry Evri vanished. Some say he escaped to a remote corner of Europe, living quietly with his immense wealth. Others believe he may have sailed to the Caribbean or Africa, blending into ordinary life, never to be seen again. What makes Evri remarkable is not just his audacity, but his ability to disappear completely. In an era without modern surveillance, he managed to evade the most extensive manhunt the world had ever seen. His story was whispered in fear by merchants, admired by pirates, and envied by anyone who dreamed of wealth and freedom on the high seas. Henry Evri's legacy is a mix of brilliance, luck, and audacity. He captured the richest treasure of his time, provoked the wrath of empires, and then disappeared without a trace, a feat no other pirate of the Golden Age could replicate. Unlike Blackbeard, who died violently, or Bartholomew Roberts, who fell in battle, Evri achieved the ultimate pirate fantasy: immense wealth, legendary status, and freedom beyond reach of the law. Even centuries later, Evri's name remains synonymous with daring, cunning, and the ultimate escape. Number 15. Edward Lowe. Edward Lowe is remembered as one of the most brutal pirates in history, a man whose cruelty earned him a reputation that terrified sailors across the Atlantic. Born around 1690 in England, Lowe's early life remains mostly obscure, but what is clear is that he came from a world of hardship. Poverty and rough beginnings may have shaped his ruthless character, transforming him into a pirate whose name would be whispered in fear for decades. Lowe began his seafaring life like many young men of his time, working on merchant ships and learning the ropes of navigation and survival at sea. But unlike most sailors who sought wealth or adventure, Lowe developed a reputation for uncontrollable violence. By the 1720s, he had fully embraced piracy, turning to the lawless life of the Caribbean and North Atlantic waters. Unlike charismatic pirates such as Sam Bellamy or Henry Evri, Lowe ruled through terror, instilling fear in every crew he encountered. His acts of cruelty were legendary. Sailors who crossed him were subjected to unimaginable punishment. One of the most infamous examples was his treatment of prisoners. He reportedly cut off the lips of some victims and cooked them, a terrifying signature that made his name synonymous with sadism. Entire crews surrendered at the mere mention of his presence, knowing that resistance often meant torture or death. Despite, or perhaps because of, his brutality, Lowe was also cunning and strategic. He captured merchant ships with ruthless efficiency, plundering their cargo and leaving chaos in his wake. He operated primarily along the Caribbean, the eastern coast of North America, and the Atlantic, using speed, surprise, and knowledge of the waters to evade naval forces and exact his vengeance. Yet, his cruelty often overshadowed his skill, making him a figure despised even among other pirates. Lowe's downfall remains mysterious. Unlike some pirates who died in battle or were executed publicly, Edward Lowe seems to have vanished from history. Reports suggest he may have died at sea or been abandoned by his crew, but no definitive record exists. His disappearance only added to his terrifying legend, leaving tales of his violence to grow in the imagination of sailors and chroniclers for generations. While some pirates are remembered for courage, cunning, or even honor among thieves, Lowe is remembered for sheer sadism and terror. He exemplifies the extremes of lawlessness at sea, showing how power and violence can transform a man into a figure both feared and reviled. In history, Lowe's name stands apart, not for treasure or clever strategy, but for the horror he left behind. Sailors feared him more than storms, more than enemy ships, and more than disease. Number 16. Olivier Levasseur, Labuse. Olivier Levasseur, better known as Labuse, was not just a pirate. He was a master of strategy, audacity, and showmanship, whose legend has haunted the seas for centuries. Born around 1690 on the island of Réunion in the Indian Ocean, Levasseur grew up far from the centers of European power. Yet even as a young man, he was drawn to the ocean and the freedom it promised, a world where cleverness, courage and cunning mattered more than birth or wealth. Levasseur began his maritime career as a sailor in the French Navy, where he learned navigation, ship handling, and the art of strategy. But the rigid life of naval service could not contain him. The lure of piracy, freedom, adventure, and unimaginable wealth pulled him into the Indian Ocean, a region teeming with lucrative trade routes and vulnerable merchant ships. It was here that Levasseur's transformation from sailor to pirate began. Known to his contemporaries as La Buse, or the Buzzard, he became infamous for his ability to strike quickly, capture heavily armed vessels, and escape before authorities could respond. Unlike some pirates who relied solely on brute force, Levasseur combined strategy, intelligence, and audacity. He knew the waters of the Indian Ocean intimately, used intelligence networks to track merchant fleets, and could inspire fierce loyalty among his crew. His raids were bold, precise, and often extraordinarily profitable, earning him one of the most formidable reputations of his era. Levasseur operated primarily around Madagascar, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean, regions where pirate enclaves flourished and trade was both profitable and dangerous. He captured ships laden with gold, silver, jewels, and luxury goods, building a fortune and a name that spread terror among merchants and navies alike. His ability to blend intelligence with aggression set him apart, and soon La Buse became a symbol of pirate cunning and charisma. But Olivier Levasseur's most legendary moment came at the end of his life, during his capture by the French authorities. In 1730, he was sentenced to hang in Saint-Paul, Réunion. Facing certain death, Levasseur performed a daring act that would cement his place in history. According to legend, he threw a cryptogram, a paper covered in symbols and letters, into the crowd, declaring that it would reveal the location of his hidden treasure to anyone clever enough to solve it. It was a final act of defiance, a challenge, and a promise all at once. The treasure of La Buse would endure long after his death. The cryptogram has never been fully solved. Generations of treasure hunters have searched for Levasseur's loot, following maps, codes, and clues, yet the treasure remains elusive. This mystery has fueled his legend, making him not only one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age, but also one of the most enigmatic. Even centuries later, his name evokes the thrill of adventure, the cunning of strategy, and the excitement of unsolved mysteries. Levasseur's life is remarkable not just for his wealth or his daring, but for the intelligence, cunning, and charisma he displayed. He combined the ferocity of a pirate with the strategy of a general and the flair of a showman. Even facing execution, he ensured his story and his treasure would outlive him. Unlike many pirates whose names faded into obscurity, Olivier Levasseur became immortal, a figure of intrigue, audacity, and endless speculation. Number 17, Benjamin Hornigold. Benjamin Hornigold was one of the most influential pirates of the Golden Age, yet his story is far from typical. Born around 1680 in England, Hornigold grew up during a time of colonial expansion, naval conflict, and growing opportunities on the high seas. He would go on to mentor one of the most notorious pirates in history, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. But Hornigold's own journey would take unexpected turns, from feared pirate to pirate hunter. Hornigold began his career in the Bahamas, a region that had become a haven for pirates preying on Spanish and English merchant ships. He quickly distinguished himself as a skilled navigator, strategist, and leader. Unlike some pirates who relied solely on intimidation or violence, Hornigold was clever, disciplined, and respected by his crew. His fleet was relatively small, but his raids were precise and profitable, targeting merchant ships along the Caribbean and the American coastline. One of Hornigold's most lasting contributions to pirate history was his mentorship of young pirates, most famously Blackbeard. Hornigold recognized talent and audacity, training and guiding those who would later become legends of the seas. Under his tutelage, Blackbeard learned not only the art of raiding and plunder, but also strategy, intimidation, and the careful manipulation of reputation, tools that would make him one of the most feared pirates in history. Yet Hornigold's story diverges sharply from the standard pirate narrative. He had a peculiar sense of honor. He refused to attack English ships, even when it would have been lucrative. This decision, while admirable, eventually caused friction with other pirates, who resented his limitations. It also highlighted Hornigold's pragmatism and loyalty, traits that would later define his unexpected career shift. By 1717, Hornigold's reputation as a pirate had grown enough that he was offered a pardon by the British Crown under the King's general pardon for pirates. Unlike many who continued a life of crime, Hornigold accepted, turning his skills to law enforcement. He became a pirate hunter, using his knowledge of pirate tactics and networks to capture former allies and enforce the law he once flouted. This transition was remarkable. A man who once terrorized the seas now used the same cunning and expertise to uphold order. Hornigold's life exemplifies the complex moral landscape of piracy. He was neither a mindless marauder nor a simple villain. He was strategic, loyal, and pragmatic. His legacy lies not only in his own raids and leadership, but in the careers he helped shape. Blackbeard and other pirates he mentored carried forward his influence, cementing Hornigold's impact on history long after he stepped away from crime. Hornigold eventually retired from active pursuit of pirates, living quietly in the Bahamas and using his experience to contribute to local defense and trade security. Number 18. Howell Davis. Howell Davis was a pirate whose daring, intelligence, and charisma made him one of the most remarkable figures of the Golden Age of Piracy. Born around 1690 in Wales, Davis began his career as a sailor in the Royal Navy, learning navigation, discipline, and the ways of the sea. But he soon realized that life in the Navy, with its rigid hierarchy and limited rewards, could never satisfy his ambition. Instead, he turned to piracy, a decision that would mark him as one of the era's most audacious captains. Davis quickly gained a reputation for cleverness and audacity. Unlike many pirates who relied solely on brute force, Davis used strategy, disguise, and psychological tactics to achieve his goals. One of his most famous exploits came when he captured a West African prince. Davis didn't storm the ship with swords drawn. Instead, he used cunning, negotiation, and precise timing to take control, demonstrating that intelligence could be as powerful as violence on the high seas. This event cemented his reputation as a pirate capable of planning and executing extraordinary feats. Beyond his daring raids, Davis had an eye for talent. He recognized potential in young pirates and took them under his wing. One of his most famous protégés was Bartholomew Roberts, who would go on to become one of the most successful pirates of all time, capturing over 400 ships. Davis's mentorship shaped Roberts's approach to piracy, teaching him discipline, strategy, and leadership, skills that would make Roberts legendary. Through this influence, Davis's impact on piracy extended far beyond his own short career. Davis operated primarily in the Caribbean and along the West African coast, where European merchant ships were vulnerable to clever and daring raids. He was known for using disguise and deception, sometimes posing as a naval officer or merchant captain to get close to his targets before striking. His ability to think ahead, anticipate threats, and exploit weaknesses made him a formidable adversary and earned him respect and fear in equal measure. Yet Davis's life was as dangerous as it was bold. In 1719, during a raid in West Africa, he was ambushed by local forces, a reminder that even the cleverest pirate could fall prey to the unpredictable dangers of the world he navigated. He died in the attack, cutting short a career that had already marked him as extraordinary. Though his life ended in an instant, the influence he had on his crew, and especially on Bartholomew Roberts, ensured that his legacy lived on. Howell Davis stands out in pirate history not merely for the ships he captured or the loot he acquired, but for his intelligence, daring, and mentorship. He demonstrated that piracy could be as much about strategy, cunning, and leadership as it was about violence. His audacity, charm, and tactical genius left a mark on the Golden Age of Piracy, shaping the careers of those who followed in his wake. Number 19. Amaro Pargo. Amaro Pargo was no ordinary pirate. Born in 1678 in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, he grew up during a time of empire, exploration, and constant maritime conflict. From a young age, he was drawn to the sea, fascinated by the ships that sailed to the Caribbean, the Americas, and beyond. Unlike many of his peers, Pargo wasn't just seeking adventure. He was driven by ambition, a desire for wealth, and a need to carve out a place in history. Pargo began his career as a sailor, learning navigation, trade, and the complex politics of maritime travel. But he quickly realized that life as a regular sailor would never satisfy him. He wanted power, freedom, and opportunity, and the sea offered all three. Soon, he became a corsair, a privateer officially sanctioned by the Spanish crown to attack enemy ships. But Amaro Pargo's approach to piracy was different from the ruthless marauders who haunted the Caribbean. He combined daring raids with a strict personal code. He attacked ships belonging to Spain's enemies, particularly Dutch, English, and French vessels. But he treated prisoners humanely, avoided unnecessary bloodshed, and ensured that his crew was treated fairly. Despite, or perhaps because of, his daring, Pargo quickly became a legend. He captured treasure-laden merchant ships, navigating the Caribbean and Atlantic waters with skill, intelligence, and daring. One story tells of how he outwitted a superior enemy fleet by sailing through hidden coves and using uncharted passages, disappearing into the sea like a ghost, leaving pursuers baffled. His reputation grew so large that his name alone inspired fear in rival sailors, yet admiration among the people of Tenerife, who saw him as a protector and hero rather than a criminal. But what truly set Amaro Pargo apart was his heart and generosity. Unlike most pirates, he used a significant portion of his wealth to benefit others. He funded churches, hospitals, and charitable projects across Tenerife. Local legends speak of him secretly helping the poor, donating money anonymously, and using his fortune to improve the lives of those around him. In a world where pirates were usually remembered for greed, bloodshed, and lawlessness, Pargo's combination of daring and philanthropy made him unique. Amaro Pargo's life was a constant balance between risk and reward, danger and morality. He faced storms, rival corsairs, and the ever-present threat of capture. Yet he survived and thrived where many others perished. Even as he accumulated wealth and power, he maintained a reputation for fairness and loyalty, which made him respected by his crew and feared by his enemies. He died in 1747, leaving behind a legacy that is still celebrated in the Canary Islands today. Streets and landmarks bear his name, and stories of his exploits are told to this day. Unlike the stereotypical pirate who dies violently or is forgotten by history, Amaro Pargo managed to achieve fame, fortune, and respect, all while giving back to his community. A rare combination that few in the lawless world of piracy could achieve. Amaro Pargo was more than a pirate. He was a corsair, a strategist, a philanthropist, and a local hero. Number 20. Rahma ibn Jabir al-Jalahima. Rahma ibn Jabir al-Jalahima is a name that resonates through the history of the Persian Gulf, a pirate whose audacity, cunning, and relentless defiance made him a legend in his time. Born around 1760 in the Arabian Peninsula, Rahma grew up during an era of shifting powers, tribal rivalries, and maritime commerce that stretched from the Gulf to India. From a young age, he was drawn to the sea, learning navigation, ship handling, and the intricate politics of Gulf trade. But Rahma's ambitions went far beyond simple trade or naval service. He craved power, autonomy, and a name that would echo through history. Rahma became a pirate and tribal leader, commanding a fleet of ships that terrorized merchant vessels along the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the waters of the Arabian coast. Unlike European pirates who relied largely on brute force, Rahma combined intelligence, strategy, and an intimate knowledge of the region's geography to launch lightning raids, ambushes, and daring escapes. His operations disrupted trade routes, challenged colonial powers, and cemented his reputation as both a formidable tactician and a relentless pirate. One of Rahma's most distinctive traits was his unwavering defiance against superior forces. Throughout his career, he fought not only rival tribes and merchant fleets, but also European colonial powers, including the British and the Persians. Time and again, Rahma's cunning allowed him to evade capture, outmaneuver enemies, and escape seemingly impossible situations. Tales of his exploits spread across the Gulf, turning him into both a feared enemy and a folk hero among local communities who admired his boldness and leadership. Rahma's story ended in the most dramatic way possible, a final act of defiance that became legendary. During a battle near Bahrain in 1826, facing imminent capture by superior forces, Rahma chose to blow up his ship rather than surrender, taking his enemies with him and ensuring that his life ended on his own terms. This act of self-destruction epitomized his fearless character and unwillingness to submit to outside control. It also cemented his legacy as a pirate who lived and died by his own code, leaving an indelible mark on Gulf history. What makes Rahma ibn Jabir al-Jalahima remarkable is not just his audacity, but the combination of intelligence, strategy, and defiance that defined his life. He was a pirate who understood the power of reputation, the importance of leadership, and the value of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Unlike many pirates whose stories are remembered solely for plunder, Rahma's legend endures because of his daring, his tactical brilliance, and the dramatic flair with which he lived and died.
That's all for today. Subscribe to Factopia for more amazing and bizarre facts. Stay curious and keep exploring.